All human cultures have an ancient background. We all have a history that goes back to find meaning to our natural world around us.
Animals and plants and rivers and waters, the way we live as people, spirituality has always played a big part of us.
If you have an understanding of spirit, you understand that that's in everything and it's everywhere all the time.
We feel it. It exists in the spaces around us. For many of us, we find a framework, either a Christian framework or another framework, to say there is a God, there is a being that's above, and through our own practices and rituals and ceremonies, we find a way to connect the intangible to our everyday life.
Ceremony is an element that's present in all cultures. It's birth, deaths, marriages, or all these different ceremonial aspects. They are part of recognising people's stages of their life.
Sometimes when we are in it in our own culture, we take for granted that others understand. But when we look at another culture, we often don't understand the whole picture about what's happening. And we see this when Australians look at Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander ceremonies and they go, I wonder what's going on there.
We hear Aboriginal ceremony, sometimes people will get frightened and think, oh, you know, we're going to call up demons and all these other things. If you look in the West, ceremonies happen all the time for everything, and it's the same in Aboriginal culture, but it just look different in the context.
So if you don't know the context behind a ceremony, we've got to find out how do we navigate through that.
In old times for us here, when you crossed into someone else's country, there was ceremony that had to happen because you're going off your country into someone else's.
It's like a celebration. So there's dancing, performing dancing, and all the countrymen would be all painted. And if the invitation says, yes, then it's okay, you enter that land.
As most people know it today, acknowledgement of country if you're not from that place. But if you're an Aboriginal person from that country, you can give a welcome and to represent what that traditional ceremony is about.
It is like what you have today. In the Western culture, you have private properties. You cannot simply go and tread on another man's land without permission. It is the same for us.
When we see the context of modern society now, we don't enter other people's homes and say, I'm going to, move through your house as though I own it. We show the respect to the people whose place we visited. We would ask permission. And so an acknowledgement of country and asking an elder to bring a welcome to country, that's kind of standard practice amongst Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people.
It's just letting people know who you are, what mob you're from, what law you follow, but also you're coming onto another person's country. You're saying that you respect their law and their protocols and rules while you're on their country.
We pay respect to our ancestors because they were here, before us. It's a way of saying thank you to them as well from way back then, and it is still here today.
Every culture acknowledges ancestry in some form. You can go from a biblical perspective and genealogies, but right through every culture has that way of acknowledgement of ancestors. But the meaning of it sometimes can get lost.
Understanding the story behind a ceremony is the context, really. It's the context that it means. I know the significance, I know its meaning, I know what to do, and I understand my role. I understand what's happening. But it's important for us to also understand that we've inherited a lot of traditions that is just taken for granted. This is our culture, this is what we do. And we don't have the story that goes behind it.
Ceremony is about making those intangible things real. Connects a principle and a practice. If I want to show respect, I can do a yawa, I can do a krobri, I could sing a song. That's a way of showing respect. It's not a tangible thing. So we've got to have a practice that demonstrates that, where shake hands come from, that's a ceremonial gesture. It come from a time when everybody carried a sword around and most people were right-handed, so they stuck out their sword hand to say, look, I come in peace. And that ceremonial gesture is carried on for thousands of years into a lot of different cultures, Our traditional cultural objects and ceremonial objects people get frightened of these things. A cup of tea is a ceremonial object. You know, when I go to any of these houses here in my community, I know what they're going to say. You want a cup of tea? It's not just that people all love tea. Just the offering is saying, look, you're welcome in my place, and I want to engage with you in this space. Lots of cultures have got, you know, ceremony around the most simple everyday thing of a cup of tea. People got to come to terms with that thinking around those things, you know, and the systems that we process things through Aboriginal world and the thinking of the Western world. There's a big gap in the thinking.
Some ceremonies are easier to understand because we can look at parts of them and go, oh yeah, I get that. I can comprehend. It might look a little bit different to me, but I can still understand the value behind it and I can understand what's going on. But there are other ceremonies, rituals, practices where we look at them and go, I'm really not sure. I'm not certain at all. And actually, I'm quite fearful of what's going on.
In all cultures, there is good and there is evil.
In every culture, people take what they've been given and they use it for themselves, and power and politics and money, and everybody's been given knowledge and been given certain abilities, but it's not just for yourself, it's for everybody else.
This is not just a simple step-through process. It's complex, it involves relationship, it involves being able to understand your own culture and your own ceremonies and rituals, as well as being curious about the others. The important thing for us is to be curious, to have the conversation with the local people.
You need to go and have a cup of tea with the Aboriginal people in the context that you're in, because even urban Aboriginal concepts and ideas and how they apply them in the context that they're in will be different from bush mob. What's their culture, what's their protocols, what's their law in their place? It's not anything to be frightened of and to back away from. I think you need to ask those same questions too and start to interrogate your own culture first, you know, and what is that has the same principle as what we're looking at in Aboriginal culture.
Ceremonies, rituals that we may or may not understand now, the more we look at finding meaning in a context together, that we can actually find a way that they will make sense to us for future generations.
Come and truly understand, you know, who we are as people. It may be different, but if, hey, you can just sit and listen, if you can just walk and drink and eat with us, if you can come with me and hunt with me, we will find that meat to eat in the end.